Hello everyone, welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. The channel where we talk about shit hits the fan. And guess what? On the East Coast, Thursday, it looks like we're going to get a chance to get an SHTF preview. And I don't say that with a happy heart, but I am going to try and look at some of the positives that can come from this. So, let's have a talk. Okay, in the last few years, well, Hurricane Katrina was a little over a decade ago. We've got some experience with hurricanes. Hurricanes are a test of civilization, a test of humanity, as well as a test of nature and what it can do to us. You know, we've looked at them for what they are. They're an act of nature. And we also wonder and fear, you know, can the government make these worse and exacerbate them? I guess at this point, it's important to note that none of that matters. The only thing that matters is it's coming. It's coming. So, you know, a couple of years ago, or just a short while back, Hurricane Harvey smacked into Houston, flooded the piss out of it, destroyed tons of property. And a lot of bad things happened, and a lot of it didn't get reported. But with Hurricane Katrina, a lot did get reported. A lot was released to the public. We saw some terrifying things occur. Human tragedy caused by nature and caused by other humans. And then we had another event just a few years back. Hurricane Sandy, I believe, went up and it smacked New York and New Jersey pretty damn hard. And we learned quite a bit of lessons there. We learned how government reacts in an emergency situation. Right? We learn how quickly they act, how they react, what they react to. Once again, it's a lesson for shit hitting the fan. It's a lesson for preppers. And I know with a high degree of certainty, because of those I've spoken to prior to hurricane here, in the last hurricane, is preppers are ready. They don't look forward to the experience, but they have a depth of understanding about what is coming, and that makes me extremely satisfied. I'm sorry for those who aren't prepared, who don't mentally have a grasp of what's going to happen or could happen. But preppers, the ones I was talking to, they were ready. They were able to face it maturely, and they were able to face it not with smugness or some sort of a glee or satisfaction, but rather with a determined self, right? A level of self-reliance that they were prepared to meet. And that's what being a prepper is. That's what prepping can do, right? So the thing with the preppers, we need, right, our food and our water and our shelter and our clothing. We need all those things. And people are learning, once again, that you have to have them before shit hits the fan, not during or after. Right? You can't buy fire insurance while your house is burning. Right? You can't pull into a gas station if your car ran out of gas 10 miles before you got there. Right? So one of the most important things we've seen as far as activities in hurricane is how the government responds. So once again, there's a portion of us, you prepper guys in South Carolina, North Carolina, along the eastern seaboard, you're going to get to have a warm-up. You're going to get to have, at the very least, a warm-up. At the most, you're going to have to deal with some real-life shit. Some real shit, it's the fan stuff. So one of the things I always like to start with, because they are the ones who have, they're the recognized authority figures. They're the ones who have guns out in public all the time, letting people know, don't fuck up or they'll get you. And it's the government. It's the government. What does government do? You know, when shit hits the fan, do they perform or do they punish? If we take a look back at Hurricane Katrina, the government punished people. The federal government failed to act. FEMA, as much as everyone knows that emergencies happen and we should be prepared, so does the government. As much as everyone knows that this hurricane is coming, so does the government. You would think that FEMA would be staged 100 miles from the coast, ready, willing, waiting, and wanting to do their job and come in and help. Right? And this isn't the first hurricane, but I don't really believe that government learns its lessons all that well. If they did, would we have socialism once again rearing its ugly head? The answer is no. So obviously government doesn't learn, at least not to the degree that a thinking, rational, logical human being does. Right? You and me, preppers. They give us lip service, just like they do with everything else. And yeah, I'm ragging on government because I am upset. I'm worried that people are going to be put in harm's way by this hurricane. Right? Evacuations have happened, but things are not going to go perfectly. I believe that, once again, government's probably going to fail. And I would love to report later otherwise. But I'm worried about my fellow man. Right? Are they going to be cared for, or is some big, monolithic, uncaring, unloving, extremist government just going to say it's their way or the highway and everyone else be damned? Right? There's going to be weak people, sick people, scared people, confused people, poor people, all sorts that are going to be affected by this. So, it is my opinion, again, looking back at history, using that as a guide, that government punishes in a hurricane. So as a prepper on the East Coast, you need to take that into account. Don't we all? Don't we all? We have to understand that when bad things happen and an area is destroyed, what does the government like to do? Well, they were confiscating guns long before they were delivering water in Katrina. In Houston, a lot of people disappeared, and we never really got a good story on that. Right? And we saw with the last big batch of hurricanes that came through Florida that it didn't really destroy Florida. I think it was Irma, right? It didn't really destroy Florida. But the preppers I talked to there, they were glad they were preppers. Right? All that insurance, all that time and effort, it was worth it. So when you get a bad hurricane, it seems like the worse a hurricane is, or we could say the worse a shit-it's-the-fan scenario is, the more government seeks to punish or to exercise its martial strength. Right? It wants to maintain law and order. It wants to protect itself. And it's incredible to me that that's what they think about. So once again, I'm going to be watching this hurricane very closely to learn from it. Right? To learn from it, because I want to see how government acts. I want to see how people act. Right? When things go bad, is martial law really needed? Or does government need martial law? Does government need curfews so it can maintain a level of control it is satisfied with? And nobody likes martial law. I don't believe that police like it. I believe that's what government demands. I know people don't like it. I would much rather rely on my own weapons, my own self-defense plan, than hope that the government disarms everyone equally and that we'll all be equally at each other's mercy. Right? So, yeah, martial law, is it really needed? Or does it actually make things worse? Does it create a greater disparity between the people who are affected by the event? In other words, criminals won't hand their guns over and they won't stand around and wait for the police to knock on the door and confiscate them. Right? They'll hide in the basement or whatever. That is what I see happening. The worse this is, the worse it gets. I seem to recall from Hurricane Sandy that there were preppers and that the mainstream media and even some social media, meaning alternative media, was vilifying preppers for being ready. I expect that. I expect that when shit hits the fan, and we've talked about this to a great degree, non-preppers are going to look to you as if you're bad, or you're the enemy, or it's your fault, or you shouldn't have any level of comfort or safety any more than anyone else, which is a socialist or communist thought. We should all be equally miserable. We should all share and share alike. right? That is very much this this victim mentality, right? Why should that person be doing better than me? Right? When shit hits the fan, I guarantee preppers are going to be miserable fucks. They're going to be scared just like everyone else. They just might have more food in their stomach, a better set of clothing to deal with the environmental conditions, and cleaner drinking water. But they're going to have the same opportunity, right? So let's look at what could happen during this hurricane. Right, the East Coast is low-lying, has a lot of swamps. I, having lived there, know that it rains a lot, right? You get a lot of rain because of the moisture. Hurricane takes advantage of that. A hurricane can be exacerbated by those conditions over there. So there's going to be an awful lot of rainfall. So when we start thinking about prepping and flooding conditions from hurricanes, we need to think about, our food prep. Shit hits the fan food prep. It needs to be in watertight containers. I mean, having a big old bag of rice is great, but if it's laying in a puddle of water, what good is it? Right? It is now soaked and, not necessarily ruined, because I guarantee you if I was hungry and I found a bag of soaking wet rice in the mud, I would be boiling it for a long time to kill everything in it, but at least I would have that rice. Anyways, but over the course of several days, you get food wet, it's going to mold, it's going to rot, it's going to go bad. It's not going to taste real good. So again, while I talked about food, it needs to be in waterproof containers. At the very least, raised to a level where it would be impossible for water to damage it. In flat areas, close to rivers and other places, water can get up and over the roofs of houses. So that's not a worry for everybody, but if you can, get your food to a safe place. If you store it in the garage, perhaps you ought to store it in the attic during the possible floods that are coming with a hurricane. Once again, it's not just being prepared, but it's having a plan and understanding what we're facing. But water, there's going to be water everywhere and not a drop to drink unless you're a prepper. Now, it doesn't mean you can't take the water that's out in the street and boil it and drink it, and then filter it, trying to get it to taste good, and then putting maybe some Kool-Aid in it to make it taste palatable, right? But when these things happen, when hurricanes happen, septic systems overfill, sewers back up, flood, right? In other words, it becomes very unsanitary very quickly. Especially in areas that are flat, because there's nowhere for the water to go, and it just stirs and agitates, creates a horrible condition. Houston saw a lot of that. Right? Houston saw a lot of that. And I was really happy that at the time we were able to contribute a lot of funds to the relief for Hurricane Harvey. Hopefully we don't even need that with this one. Hopefully this hurricane does a 180, goes back out to sea, and just dies a nice, quiet hurricane death. We can't count on it, though, and that's why you're preppers. So getting back to this idea of shelter, our Maslowian hierarchy needs, right? We need food, water, shelter. Shelter, it's critical, right? Wherever you're at, this hurricane is coming. It could rip the house, the lid off your house. It could do a number of damaging things. So preppers are going to understand that. They're going to board up their windows. They're going to take some advanced precautions. Once again, congratulations, you guys that are going to be affected. At least you've got a chance to get through this with the least amount of damage and the most amount of health. Shelter is critical, but clothing is also going to be equally critical, right? And again, my prayers are that we're not exposed to this, and that people don't get hurt, don't get damaged, right? Don't get hospitalized, sick, or dead. But clothing is going to be really critical. The ability to dry clothing and having extra clothing. And, as a prior serviceman, have dry socks. You need to keep your feet healthy. Your feet get fucked up, you're not going anywhere. Okay, but also as critical as any of those other things is standard medications. Again, if you can get out to a store and try and get antiseptic or antibiotic creams, if you don't have them, get them, because there's going to be a lot of this standing water around. And even if it's just a shallow puddle or a shallow pond, right? There's going to be pathogens, germs, bacteria, right? Disease. And if you've got a cut or a scrape, it can get septic quick. And if this is a bad hurricane, right, there's going to be an incredible draw on medical services and supplies, right? So a mild cut could be aggravated and become infectious. It could become internalized through the bloodstream, and you can become very sick or die from it. You're going to need to be able to clean everything and keep it antiseptic, right? Kill the germs that are there and keep it. So have medical supplies, have first aid kits ready and on hand, right? And last but not least is self-defense, right? I don't think a normal person comprehends that when shit hits the fan, you need to take care of yourself, right? A house fire, not so much. A hurricane, yes, a lot. Back in Katrina, what did we see and hear an awful lot of? We heard about rape. We heard about murder. We heard about assaults. We heard about thefts. And these occurred not only from the civilian population, but from the government, including the raping. You need to defend yourselves. Right? You need to be able to defend yourself from everybody and everything that poses a threat. And this is horrifyingly a part of the way it happens and what happens. Right? People that want to believe in kumbaya, we all need to pray for that kind of stuff. But it just doesn't happen that way. Some areas are worse than others, and some areas completely collapse into mayhem in these situations. There are many Europeans that have survived more recent shit hits the fan episodes, like over in the Balkans. And they've come here and they share their stories willingly on YouTube and Patreon. Hopefully we'll get some people that share that, because it needs to be taken seriously. Self-defense is no joke. No joke. Having a defensive perimeter, having your house boarded up improves defense. Right? Not just the sanctity of your home and to protect your glass from being broken by either the hurricane or vandals, but it provides a greater level of security in your home. What else can you do, right? But self-defense is important. And it brings us to a very interesting point in the conversation. I talked about how government tends to act. They tend to take rights and take property, right? They almost take a punitive or punishing stance for those that they run into. And governments for all time have done this. Not just the U.S., not just right in our civilized time, but throughout history. Government and its agents punish people in hard times. And if you need to read the history books, go look at the real history books. Not the fluff, but the real down and dirty, what happens. Right? They don't stop collecting their taxes. Not in the old days. And if they couldn't have it one way, they would find some way to get what they needed and wanted from people. Enough said there about that. But self-defense, if you are in your home bunkered in and hunkered down, and the police come to your door and say, we're collecting weapons, you need to understand that there's a potential that could happen. You need to understand where you're at. You need to understand if you're going to tell them no, or if you're going to tell them yes. You need to be aware that if you tell them no, they may shoot your ass. Literally, shoot your ass. They may just say, hey, look, we're just telling you that we think we should have them, and they might back the fuck up. If a lot of people say you're not taking our guns because we know what happened in Katrina, that could happen. I don't know. And what I do know is the worse the storm is, the stronger and more powerful and devastating a hurricane is, right, the more aggressive everyone gets. And it was fascinating and also horrifying to watch how they confiscated weapons in Hurricane Katrina. And how people were left defenseless, having broken no law, right? Having broken no law. In fact, having lived up to their obligation to themselves and their families and their groups, whether you want to call them prepper groups or communities. They were left defenseless, and then they were robbed for it later, afterwards. Lots of people were taken advantage of. So how is it that you let the police know that's not going to happen? That if this hurricane gets out of hand, that they won't be taking anyone's guns? Do you discuss this with the sheriff and police ahead of time? Do you form neighborhood groups and call the police and say, hey, we're over here, right? This is Cedar Lane, and from block number 4 to block number 10 on Cedar Lane, we will be armed, will remain armed, and will maintain the peace in our neighborhood. There will be no gun confiscation. Is that what you do? Right? What you do is up to you. I'm not giving anyone advice. I'm just saying this has happened in the past, gun confiscation. And as a result of that, those people were left in a state of defenseless terror, and they were victimized. So if something bad were to happen in my area, you can bet your ass I would be talking to the law enforcement in the area, because I would want to let them know I need to defend myself. It's important. You guys know who I am. I know who you are. You know where I'm at, right? And can't we all just get along? Terrible, right? It's a terrible situation to confront, and I hope no one has to do it. One of the things that I find heartening from time to time is speaking with law enforcement in small communities who actually are happy that citizens are armed, that they take great comfort in knowing that the citizens actually have their back. And I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot of that on the East Coast, right? Because North Carolina, that's where Mayberry is. Right? That was Pilot Hill, I think, or Pilot Mountain. That's where Mayberry is, right? That's, where you have Don Knotts, right, as the policeman in the town. I know that that's a caricature of a caricature, but still, right? Everyone knows who they are and who each other is, and they rely on each other. I'm hoping to see more of that and hear about more of that. That would make me feel good about shit it's the fan for everybody when it occurs. And also coming with self-defense is just planning, right? It is coming. Now, when I talk about shit it's the fan general, a lot of times I go, I don't know what's going to be. Is it going to be the banking system taken down through a cyber attack? Is it going to be a EMP? Is it going to be something else? Is it going to be a grid down scenario, or is it going to be, civil unrest, right, and a partisan type civil war? Is that what's going to cause it? In this case, we know it's a hurricane. And it's good to know that all of our fellow, right, brothers and sisters there on the East Coast have a chance to plan for what's coming. I think preppers will have a big advantage for themselves in that they can plan and have a head start, right? And I think lastly I want to discuss is part of planning is anticipating the consequences of bad human behavior. I've talked about the government and how it's abusive, but I also want to talk about other people. During Hurricane Harvey in Houston, during Katrina, during every serious event, looting occurs. During every serious event, people are taken advantage of. They're victimized by others. And so bad human behavior comes about at these times, and it is inevitable. It's inevitable. Even people that you would otherwise think should know better, they're going to demonstrate the very worst characteristics of humans. And so you need to anticipate that and understand to the best of your ability what direction it's going to come from. And it's part of planning. It's not just planning the physical, it's planning the psychological. It doesn't mean you have to greet every person, right, by shoving a 12-gauge barrel over the end of their nose and giving them some dirty, hairy type advice, right? But it just means don't be taken by surprise, right? Hope for the best. Anticipate the worst. That's the best I can do on this. But we're going to get a good peek at it, are we not? We're going to see how people behave. We're going to see how governments behave. We're going to see what happens. And my thoughts and prayers are out with everybody. Right? If this was a perfect world where we all made perfect decisions, it wouldn't be a worry. There wouldn't be a thing to worry about. But we don't live in that world. We live in this one, where people use any excuse to hurt others. They use extreme forms of thought, extreme and delusional thought processes to make their decisions and make excuses for what they do. There is no excuse for bad human behavior, but it doesn't mean it won't happen. So do your best. Be prepared, right? Because chance favors the prepared mind is yours. Godspeed to everyone. God bless America and everyone on the East Coast. I hope this really turns out to be a nothing sandwich. But if not, right, do your very best to get through it and learn all that you can. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you guys soon. Probably tomorrow.